it's really, really easy to be resilient about something when you really believe in it. And that's what Auror's let us do. It's let us build something that we believe in and we can see the outcome. I mean, Operation Banshee, right? That was 8 people, £90,000. And when you click in to see the map of where they've been active, you're like, whoa.
You're listening to the Retail Crime Intelligence Podcast by Auror, where we share actionable insights to help you reduce crime and violence in your stores.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're in a good spot to start. My name is Ellen Dick. I am the Director of Retail Partnerships here at Auror for the UK and Ireland. And I'm incredibly excited to spend the next 45 minutes having a conversation with my friend and Auror partner, Hannah Cleary. We have been on quite an amazing journey with Morrisons in the last 18 months. We have seen an ambitious transformation project become full steam and really taking on some chunky, quite ambitious challenges using clever technology, and the results are already, even at this early stage, speaking for themselves. So I know this is one that lots of other retailers are really interested to tune into. So Hannah, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about your role?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Ellen. So I head up crime prevention and security for Morrisons. So myself and my small but perfect team, we look after the security strategy for our supermarkets, our convenience stores, really with a mission to reduce crime and loss and focus on improving colleague safety as well. I think in terms of the role itself, it still feels a little bit like a transformation project, sort of a year in. My team has a 3-year plan to completely overhaul the security infrastructure across the estate with some really amazing integrated technology, or first and foremost among those, and some incredible people and just some really, really great partnerships. And then at the same time as all of that, there's the kind of business as usual when your day job is trying to protect people and products across sort of 1,500 sites. So I have that role to play within the wider loss prevention team as well.
Yeah, Hannah, that's amazing. And I think there's a few things that lots of retailers on this call will be able to resonate with, right? As that small but perfectly formed team, part of the ambition of your transformation is being able to really maximize all of the resources you have available and getting all of those technologies to talk to one another. So I'm really excited to dive into that. But before we get into the detail of what the transformation and what that solution looks like, I think it's worth touching on the challenges. So casting our minds back, can you help paint a picture for our audience? Where was Morrisons 18 months ago? What was the challenge? And what was that kind of catalyst for change?
Okay. Yeah, great question. Okay, so in terms of challenges we were facing, I think in many ways they were the same as any other retailer out there, right? We've all seen the numbers on retail crime, and we were in a place in Morrisons, as were so many others, where that felt almost insurmountable, right? And our losses related to that were higher than we would have liked. Our colleagues were pretty frustrated, maybe even a little bit worried as sort of the retail environment got a little bit more volatile. Yeah, that's a shared challenge, right? And then I think a couple of the challenges that we were facing were a little bit more unique to Morrisons. So our technology was a little bit outdated. We hadn't invested particularly heavy in that area from a loss prevention perspective. So that meant that things like our reporting to police was really inconsistent, and those partnerships weren't there, which I know a lot of other retailers find it really important to leverage. So we're a bit behind the pack in that respect. And then there's this real sense of urgency to catch up, right? Because you've got to be a tougher target than the guy down the road. Otherwise, you're going to end up with all of his losses as well as your own losses. So there's this real compulsion to catch up. And then you can fall into that trap of trying loads of stuff, right? Trialing all of the latest products, all the new shiny stuff. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And we move on to the next thing. And then suddenly you're where we were, which is you've got quite a fragmented infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And having been an operator in a previous life with Morrisons, I knew that frustration. And so the one thing I was really clear from the beginning of ramping this up was it had to be about simplification. It had to be about integration, a really consistent set of tools across the estate and all of them adding value. I think that was the goal.
Yeah, I love to hear you say that. And I think that there are more retailers that would relate to that than, we'd consider, where, fragmented, almost like Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, we'll bolt it on here. And
the approach to technology can cause all sorts of challenges, which lead to mounting losses, to increasing violence in stores, and then also that really challenging impact to colleagues. And ultimately, that's the biggest asset in any of these retail businesses that we want to make sure that we're protecting. So I think the challenges there are really clear. What was the moment that caused you and the team to need to move, like go from that state into a world where you're looking at retail crime intelligence versus a system of record? What did that look like? And I'm inviting you to speak quite candidly here.
Okay. So I think there came a point, there was, so as a retailer, we've always relied really, really heavily on that kind of traditional boots on the ground guarding, right? We'll stick a guy in a tactical vest and that has its merits. Mm-hmm. I think where we were with our existing suppliers, we had a few sort of little things that we wanted to improve. And so because it wasn't enough just to overhaul the technology infrastructure, I decided we were going to go with a new security partner, a relatively unknown in UK retail, OCS. They're incredible. You've met them. They're great. But I think also the realization, and we've always been open about this, that kind of traditional boots on the ground guarding is really not sustainable in today's environment with that mounting volatility. Let's face it, people are inexpensive.
Yeah.
Commodity, right? For want of a better word. Not that I see them as a commodity, but we'd always relied really heavily on physical infrastructure. So if we could stick a gate on it or a door on it, we were going to do that, right? And that stops some of the issues some of the time. If you're not that determined to leave without paying, then it might stop you. What it doesn't necessarily stop is the more aggressive or the more determined offenders. And we needed a strategy for them. And, some of that physical infrastructure can be a source of friction in the customer journey, which is something you need to be really aware of in the modern retail world. It's the one thing you really can't afford to do is upset your customers. So that real dichotomy of how do we stop the bad actors without irritating our genuine customers? So I think that was the tipping point, realizing that we couldn't carry on as we were for the next 3 or 4 years. And then we also had our crime hub, so a little team of colleagues led by Rachel, who's our director in the crime hub. Those guys are OCS as well, and they work alongside us. And they were pretty frustrated. They are an incredible group of people, right? Highly qualified, really dedicated, really resilient, and really, really curious, right? Which you and I have talked about. Curiosity is important in this world. And they were doing so much manual work. Everything was a spreadsheet, a notebook, and so one of the big wins that we saw quite quickly with Auror was that we could massively increase the output using kind of the same number of man hours, and the world opened up before that. So yeah, just the tech was a bit basic. We liked the physical over the sort of artificial intelligence technology model, and all these really unsustainable things that come with really chunky capital costs and ongoing maintenance costs. And also they rely on interventions from our colleagues. And frankly, our colleagues have got better things to do, right? We give them a long enough list as it is. So yeah, that's where we were at, I think.
Yeah, that's a really strong summary, Hannah. And I think one of the things that resonates with me most is how do you take that human investment, those boots on the ground guards in your stores, the specialist investment from your crime hub, who are absolutely fantastic, and just give them the tools and the intelligence they need to really sweat that asset and let them do their best work. And we're seeing that come together now, which has been really exciting. Yeah. We talked about kind of bringing to life a couple of those insights from the early Auror pilot that kind of illustrated some of those turning points. So I've got a couple of those noted here. And the first was at the Crime Hub. Using Auror, we're able to better identify those repeat and violent people that were impacting your stores, right? So across just 30 stores in the Midlands, in a kind of time-limited pilot, we already saw that there were 10% of offenders that were causing 81% of harm and loss in those stores, right? Yeah. So that is super impactful. If we're going to focus their time and energy, that is something that we want to do. But then also something that I'm proudest of, and I know that this means a lot to you and your team as well, is the colleagues on the ground, security colleagues and, Morrisons retail colleagues. 9 out of 10 of those colleagues reported feeling safer as a result of having some of that Auror intelligence available at their fingertips. So that was certainly some of the indicators that we were headed down the right path in those early days, kind of, 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agree.
So what I'd love to understand next is you've taken on Auror in a pilot capacity, a crime intelligence tool where you had an existing reporting tool already.
We did.
Was your initial experience, and maybe what surprised you off the back of that pilot?
You have painful memories of this time, don't you, Ellen? So I think, look, I approached Auror, and to be really clear, I'm not the one that brought Auror to the table. That's a colleague of ours who was in corporate protection at the time, a guy called Carl, who was just really, really stubborn in the face of all of my hard-won store manager style cynicism about this reporting platform. He was stubborn, and he held out for that trial and made that work. I think it took me a little while to understand the ways in which your platform added that agility and that focus. I do remember saying, hold on a second, I've already got a reporting platform. I'm not paying for another one. And at that point, I didn't really know what I was looking for. The vision was still quite vague, I think. I think it was probably 2 or 3 months in before I really stopped and looked at some of the output and went, oh, wow, okay, I'm starting to get it now, because actually this wouldn't have been delivered under the old platform, right? This connection wouldn't have been made, this investigation wouldn't have been built, this prosecution, when it comes right down to it, would not have happened. And I think that's when I started to get really excited about the capability. And I remember it's really addictive, right? Those people who have Auror on their laptop or their phone, and you watch that feed, it's great. Can not that it shifts my focus from my work, but occasionally it's on in the background. And I remember quite early on after the pilot, when we just started rolling it out across stores, and one of our stores, not a particularly high risk store, in Norfolk and Essex, and this really great guard called Lindsay, and she had logged a report, and it was textbook a great Auror report, right? It had the evidence, it was really well written. And then one of our store detectives in the area, who's brilliant, was like, hang on a second, I've just had these guys in the store that I'm in, and this is happening live on the feed, right? They're putting the comments against the feed, and then the Crime Hub pick it up, and they're like, yep, you're both right, thank you, we've connected it. Oh, and by the way, we've also found him here, here, and here, so we've opened an investigation. And that's the first time you could sort of say, those guys who are on the sharp edge of this, right, out there in stores, that's when they can start to see the real value just from doing their job. So you've got the bottom-up approach, and then at the same time, you've got the Crime Hub who were out of their minds with excitement because they're leveraging it to create investigations and police collaboration that maybe wasn't there before. And, it's cheesy, but the empowerment that they then had, that was really gratifying to see. And I think they were part of the deciding factor, because you kind of go, all right, these guys they know their stuff, right? And they're telling me it's a great platform. So
yeah,
we'll sign on the dotted line.
I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing you talk about is that visibility and that feedback loop that brings your people across the estate on the journey in the right way, which is typically this jump that retailers go from like a system of record into an intelligence-led world, right? Where it enables collaboration and connection and allows each person, whether it be a store colleague or a security guard or a store detective or a Crime Hub colleague, understand the role that they play in that kind of crime intelligence prevention outcome machine. And I think that gives people a lot of fulfillment and reinforces that, them playing their part or reporting an event or giving good customer service when a known offender enters a store. All of those things are worth doing because they're generating the right outcomes. And we often focus on those very big, shiny police outcomes, which are really, really meaningful. But there's a whole lot more we can share and kind of expose to people in the estate to really bring them on the journey. And I think that that's something you talk to so well.
And look, we're still working on that, right? There's still loads that we can do in that space. But if you have a store that adopts it or a guarding group that adopts it, it snowballs, Ellen. Like, you don't have to do the sales pitch on this. It just speaks for itself once you've got it embedded a little bit. So yeah, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, so cool. And so that was, 18 months ago. Your team were really successful in rolling this out, across parts of the estate from there. I think I saw the strategy really take shape at that point when you had more crime intelligence available to lead those decisions and to kind of guide where that resource was best deployed. Can you talk to us about how crime intelligence helped shape that strategy and kind of what role your curiosity played in that?
Well, I think data-led deployment is every retailer's dream, right? Because you've got limited resources and you want to maximize the impact. So, and we're still talking as we look at what our FY27 investment plan looks like. We're still talking about what does true data-led deployment look like and just how agile can we make it. And we're working with OCS on that in particular. Because it does mean you can do more with less, and that's, you don't need a bigger sort of hook than that, really. I think it wasn't initially about the geography, it was about the nature of the offences. And that's when, look, we didn't do all of that on our own. The Auror team, who just think of product development as like their life's mission, was sort of coming at us and going, oh, we've got this in the works. Do you think you'd be interested? And so as an example, we were seeing lots of suspect vehicles. Okay, that's great. But what do you want my guard to do? Like, stand out in the car park waiting for the vehicle to show up? What can we do with that? And that's when Auror came and said, hey, we can link the ANPR feed in for you. So you've got a live feed. And so I think it was almost like a call and response. And because it's such an open partnership, and I think your team works so hard to understand what retailers want, I think it's quite easy to do that whole, here's what we're seeing. What have you got for us, guys? And the Auror team are like, oh, do you want to try this? Yeah, okay. So ANPR was the first kind of a response to the type of event that we were seeing, and ANPR has paid dividends, right? We know ANPR has done some really exciting things from the beginning, but I think that's how it shaped the strategy. It was more about the nature of the challenge and the offender.
Yeah, so cool. And I think the more visibility, the more you can be tactical about your response, right?
Yeah.
Like, you guys were very astute in how you were able to leverage existing investments, existing number plate recognition technology, and layer on top your crime intelligence. So, I mean, when we started piloting ANPR, one of the things that I geek out over this stuff. Anyone that knows me well knows that I'm a big ANPR.
I've noticed this, Ellen. Yeah. Okay, you do your data thing. Go on.
But the cool thing in pilot is that we saw 63% of detections of those vehicles were linked to people that had committed multiple offences at Morrisons, but also their detections weren't near or in the neighborhood of those stores where they were being, kind of initially reported. So again, it's kind of closing the gap on what you don't know. So Hannah, one of your strengths is obviously storytelling and really bringing this to life. Have you got any memorable moments from the ANPR pilot or rollout that you could share that might bring some of this vehicle intel to life for other Auror partners or retailers on the webinar?
And you're right, it is the repeat offenders. I think the other thing you've got to remember, Ellen, is that value, that loss prevented in association with a vehicle alert is like 3 times higher than with a normal store reported incident, right? Because I'm I'm filling my boot with spirits rather than just, catching the bus with my little bag of goodies. So I think, the values that are in there are what get really convincing. I could tell one story, which if Hannah Wing is watching, she will laugh at. And it's probably not the best example of what turned into an investigation. But I remember there was this one guy, right? This guy was weird. And he was visiting stores up and down the country. And the most he ever stole, because we watched him, I had Rachel in the Crime Hub going, Hannah, I cannot expend any more energy on this guy for a packet of Baby Bell. But I'd message Hannah Wing and be like, he's back. So that was the first time we went, oh my God, this takes a single event reported in one of our Birmingham stores and takes it nationwide. Now, as it was, we didn't manage to prosecute for a pack of Baby Bell. But since then, we've seen, I'd say about 30% of our investigations are initiated or dramatically expanded by virtue of an ANPR alert. So, if we've got him in Edgbaston in Birmingham, we're totally expecting him to go down the road to Castle Brom. We're not expecting him to drive up to Yorkshire or whatever. Well, now we absolutely are, and we can see him and we can ring the stores to say, this guy that's just pulled into your car park, So I think, and then the thing that really captured our imagination and was quite unexpected is the value it adds when you've got local prolific offenders, right? So these are the really problematic ones. We've got a lovely guy called Wayne who has been causing, won't cause for much longer because, that investigation's been closed. He causes all sorts of problems in just 3 of our shops. And if you go back 12 months, that would have been the store's problem to deal with. Oh my God, someone ring the police, it's him again. We've had enough. We can take that off their hands now. And that's a really, really valuable thing when you've got colleagues and managers who are, trying to do a million things well, trying to serve the customer well, when you can take that off their hands and say, don't worry, guys, we've got ANPR, we'll turn this into an investigation and get the police involved. So yeah, that's the unexpected winner for us on ANPR.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think that it's worth shouting out the work that the Crime Hub does on this, because often in retail organizations, Morrisons is no exception. The Crime Hub are this incredibly skilled, hardworking team. But one of the things we want to do is make it really material for store teams that they are there to help, that they can take this burden away from those stores to de-escalate that frustration and that kind of end of tether risk that those colleagues are feeling on the ground.
Yeah, which can get confrontational, maybe someone, and I think Auror opens up that line of communication, right? Because all you got to do is tag the Crime Hub team in on the feed and you've got that response straight back and that point of contact. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, I love a data snack, right? You know this, but looking at some of the latest number plate recognition intel from Morrisons, we see that detected vehicles of interest, their average event value is 5 times higher than a regular offender that has been logged in Auror. So again, if you're a retail leader looking for evidence that you are focused in the right place, that's gold dust.
Yeah,
so
plug in your ANPR, guys, because the payback is almost instantaneous. So yeah, people should get on that.
Yeah, cool. And Hannah, I like that you talk about return on investment, right? Because I think one of the things that you and I always talk about is how to balance the colleague safety sentiment with return on investment. And I think one of the functions you have that does this really well is that Crime Hub team. Can you talk to us a little about what they do, how they're using the platform, maybe how their world has evolved in the last 18 months, and then what some of those outcomes are?
Yeah, so I think you're right. And I think, I know you love your data slides. I think data's great. And, at the end of the day, we work for a private equity company in retail, the return on investment's important. But the human interest is there as well with Auror. And I think, we're not in a place yet where we can say that every colleague feels better because of Auror. But when you look at some of the local stories, so one of our first big successes, Operation Ember, the Crime Hub built that from scratch. It was funny because it was one of the ones they had on one of their little spreadsheets somewhere. And in the very early days, Rachel was like, we're going to test this investigations function on Auror. We're going to plug in some of our existing data and see where it goes. And where it went was a massive, map of offences across the West Midlands, or Emble's West Midlands. And what we saw after we secured police collaboration, and the West Midlands police have always been along on this journey with us in particular, the stores that those offenders were targeting, when they go away for sort of, 10 weeks, 16 weeks, you see a drop in incidents in that store. And I'm not naive, right? It's retail crime. There's always someone queuing up to take their place. But if you can demonstrate, these bad actors, the Crime Hub know them by name. Like, when they get a message that one of them has got prison time, or they're over the moon. They're like, yes, we got, dodgy Pete or whatever. Sorry if there's any Pete's out there. But so I think, the fact that the Crime Hub know that if we deal with Operation Ember, we will materially improve the experience for colleagues in these 5 stores for the next 16 weeks. And then, do you know what? They're back out. There's someone else taking their place. We'll go again. But that's okay, because it's really, really easy to be resilient about something when you really believe in it. And that's what Auror's let us do. It's let us build something that we believe in and we can see the outcome of. I mean, Operation Banshee, right? That was 8 people, £90,000. And when you click in to see the map of where they've been active, you're like, whoa. I remember being at an Auror event and there was another retailer there, and it was like, you show me your map and I'll show you mine. And I was like, yeah, sorry, my map is bigger. But Banshee got to a point where we were able to say to these stores, Banshee 2's in your shop, all right? You've dealt with her before. Just let her get on with it. Don't worry. Don't approach her. We've got such good footage, we will secure prosecutions for these people. And they did, right? They made good on their promise with that. So, yeah, I think it's in the local stories that you start to see the impact, and then you can go, well, that's going to add up across the estate, right?
Yeah, certainly. And I think you've done a great job of kind of capturing the hearts and minds, not just of those kind of boots on the ground colleagues, but also leadership across the business. And they've really wrapped around this strategy to help support and give it legs. Something you and I talk about a lot is this connected technology and partner ecosystem that, it really takes a village. You said at the beginning, your team is small but perfectly formed. And so again, how can you have impact in retail where, we're being asked to do more with less? What does that collaboration and that kind of joined up approach look like for you, and why is that important?
Okay, so stop me if I get overly pink and fluffy about this, because this just does it for me. I think there was that moment of honesty at the beginning, right, where we went, oh my God, we are no good with this technology. Like, we don't, So from the beginning, it was about, let's find the right 2, 3, 4 partners to come with us, the people who are prepared to stand behind their products, best in class products, great suppliers committed to product development. So, we've got OCS, we've got Dual Stream, we've got Duress body cams, and we've got you guys. And we've been quite open from the beginning. I'm not going to have a body camera if it doesn't work with my Auror platform. And, Duress were incredibly responsive to that. And now we can voice report into our body cams. We're trialing that. We can live stream for in the moment support from our Crime Hub. And ultimately, we'll probably get Auror alerts sent to the body cam. So, and we had to wave goodbye to a couple of suppliers, right? Who maybe they were a wee bit complacent about their products. And like, you've been there when we've done working groups, and I kind of look around the room, and we come from all different backgrounds, and there's not that many of us, right? But the one thing that's true of all of our suppliers is the senior people are super invested in the mission. You talk about your mission all the time, and the way that you guys at Auror and our other partners have invested and made my mission your mission is the only thing that enables us to do what we do. So when I talk to you about, could I have a degree of integration here? Would you be prepared to talk to this supplier? If it's reasonable, you're like, yeah, all right, let's see what we can do. And And that's where, when we look at the products we're going to roll out next year, that's where that's come from. That's, that's the partnership. I love it. I really, genuinely, it adds value.
Yeah, they say it takes a village, and it really does, right? I think if we're all focused on that same mission, we can go so much further. Very cheesy, but very true.
Yeah.
You talk a bit about what you're doing next and where your head's at. Can you paint that picture for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a number of things in trial, right? So I wonder if now's a good time to reference our latest trial. So we have dipped our toe into the world of subject recognition with Auror. So we have a teeny tiny trial of that. And if you can think of a more emotive subject in retail right now, hats off to you. But I think we'd seen incredible results from the tech as it was. And then we had to stop before we patted ourselves on the back too much and do a bit of a gap analysis. And we found a couple of things where we were like, is there anything we can do in this space? And, in come Auror and go, well, we're trying this. Do you want to have a look at it? So we ended up with an incredible subject recognition product that bolts on to our existing database. So you've got all of those great efficiencies of it leveraging a single data stream, a single user interface, but you've also got the added safeguarding and reassurance that comes with the fact that the Auror reporting platform is an established and well-used mechanism, which we can validate and, we can scrutinize. So then when you're bolting on something else where you're going, right, subject recognition, we need to do this properly, you've got that great foundation underneath it. So it just gives you a little bit more confidence. So yeah, and there's a ton of cool stuff that we're working on for next year. And, that gap analysis has been extensive. Yeah, hot off the press product development coming at you in FY27. So
yeah, so exciting. And I think it's been so cool going on that subject recognition journey with you in particular, the care you have shown for deploying this technology in the right way. There's one thing being kind of technology led, but then being led by the mission, led by the challenge, and deploying quite sensitive technology that has reputational impacts. When you're doing it in the right way, you are incredibly careful. You are listening to your colleagues, to your customers, and you are deploying it in a way that makes sense for retail, that's not introducing extra process or extra pressure or extra risk, then we're in a far better place. So yeah, you guys have been a wonderful partner on that journey, and we look forward to kind of growing that with you amongst many other things. Lots of exciting stuff on the pad for next year.
Yeah, for sure.
For retailers that are sat where you were 18 months ago, that are wanting to dip their toe in this space, that are wanting to build a cohesive data-led crime intelligence strategy with joined up tech and teams that are empowered to do their best work, what would you say? Like, what is the recommendation that you would make for them?
Ellen, that's a very big question. That's a huge question. Can I submit a slide pack or something? You start by being honest about your own organizational capabilities. You start by being brutally honest about what you've tried in the past that hasn't worked. So one of the things, and I say this about our partnership as well, and the team at Auror and OCS and Dualstream and Duress as well, leave your egos at the door. So, just let's be really brutally honest about what we've done well, what we haven't, and what we need to change. And let's change it really, really as quickly as possible. Let's not throw bad money after good, right? So really honest gap analysis, and then take a long, hard look at your existing suppliers and decide if they are the right people, right? Research the subject. So, ex-store manager did not like technology. No, thank you. And then when I started to research, which I had to do in particular for the subject recognition piece, never thought I'd be excited about, algorithm bias and all that kind of thing. But it's a really fascinating subject. So do your research and then make really careful choices, and don't buy anything that isn't simple and able to be integrated and scalable, because that's the only way to make wise investments. And the more wise investments you make, we stuck ANPR into 100 shops, and now we absolutely know that we can do what we like with that because the return on investment was incredible. So, and that's why Auror works really well, because with Auror, you can establish the foundation, and you guys gave us time to do that. And then you start to look at what are the kind of incremental improvements that we can make. Are they right for us? And you guys don't have an ego. If I tell you no, then fine, it's a no. We'll find the next thing that works. And just build it steady with a really open and honest partnership. That sounds really woolly, but that's because it's going to be different for every organization. But that's what worked for us. And I would never have thought something that sounds so simple could be so transformative, but it has been.
Yeah, so cool. I love that. You summarized that so well. And I think the honesty, the collaboration, and then that curiosity, those are the three threads.
And agility. It's the agility. Agile and curious and resilient. That's what you need.
Yeah, cool. That's retail. My goodness. Well, Hannah, you speak so eloquently on this topic, and I could talk to you about this for hours. So first, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and energy. If anyone's got any final questions for Hannah or myself on any of these, bits that we've mentioned, drop them in the chat and we will reach out and respond. Or if I have my way, there will be a follow-up conversation for those that are going along to Retail Risk in London on the 18th of June. Hannah and I will be taking to the stage to pick up the next chapter of this conversation. So really looking forward to that as well.
Can't wait.
So good. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in today. We really appreciate your time. And Hannah, most all, thank you so much. Until next time.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you for listening to the Retail Crime Intelligence podcast by Auror. Don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast app.